At the very back of the marina, past the boats that still go out on weekends, there is one that hasn't moved in 2 years. The canvas is green with mildew, the hull is streaked, and the slip fees haven't been paid in longer than anyone wants to say. Walk past it, and you would never guess what it was. But there was a year, not so long ago, when a boat exactly like this one cost more than most people's houses, and a man stood on that dock with his chest out because owning it meant he had finally made it. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. This is the full story, not the brochure version, the human one. Picture the year as 1988. The economy was good, the money felt real, and for a certain kind of American man, there was one purchase that said everything without saying a word. Not the car in the driveway. Everybody had a nice car. The boat. A big fiberglass cruiser with a cabin you could stand up in, a galley, a real bed in the back, and a bridge up top where you sat with one hand on the wheel and felt like the king of the whole harbor. It cost a fortune. That was the point. You were not buying transportation, you were buying proof. And the men who bought them were not born rich. That is the part that matters. These were the dentists and the contractors and the guys who had built a small business up from nothing. The ones who had worked 30 years and finally had something left over at the end of the month. The boat was the trophy for all of it. It was the thing your own father never could have dreamed of owning. You had grown up watching the rich people leave the dock, and now you were the one untying the lines, and your kids were the ones waving from the bow. The boat was built to make you feel exactly that way. You came down the dock and stepped aboard into a cockpit with deep cushions, and through the door was a world that didn't belong on the water at all. Carpet, a dinette where the family ate, a little kitchen with a stove, and a refrigerator that hummed, and in the back, tucked under the deck, a private cabin with a real bed where you and your wife could close the door and listen to the water against the hull all night. Up the ladder was the flybridge, open to the sky, where you sat above everything and everyone could see you sitting there. It wasn't fast. It wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be lived in, and lived in it was. Those were the good summers. The cooler loaded on Friday afternoon, the grandkids tucked into the forward bunk, the wife stretched out on the aft deck with a paperback while you idled out past the breakwater. You'd raft up with the other boats from the marina, tie them all together in a quiet cove, and the men would stand around on the swim platforms talking about engines, and the women would pass food across the rails, and the kids would jump off the back until the sun went down. That boat was where your family was happiest. You knew it then, and you'd give anything to have one of those afternoons back now. It was where your marriage got to breathe too, the two of you up on that bridge at the end of a long day, the kids finally asleep below, the water flat and gold and going quiet. Not saying much because you didn't need to. You'd worked so hard for so long that you'd half forgotten how to just sit still beside the person you did it all for. The boat gave you that back. For a few summers, it gave you that back. It was never about the water for some of those men. It was about the look on a face at the ramp when you backed that big cruiser down and everyone turned to watch. It was about the name you got to give it, painted across the stern, usually something with your wife's name in it. It was about belonging to a club you were never supposed to be allowed into. For a working man who'd done everything right, that boat was the receipt. See, it said, I made it. We made it. He remembered the first day he brought it home better than almost anything. The drive to the marina with his wife beside him, both of them quiet, neither quite believing it was real. The first time he heard those big engines turn over under his own hand. The first slow idle out of the harbor with the whole family aboard. Everyone a little nervous, everyone grinning. He'd worked his entire life for a feeling he couldn't have named, and that morning, standing on the bridge of his own cruiser with the water opening up in front of him, he finally felt it. Whatever it cost, it was worth it that day. He'd have told you so himself, and then slowly, so slowly you almost didn't notice, the world the boat lived in began to change. It started at the fuel dock. A cruiser like that drinks fuel the way nothing else you own ever has, a mile or two to the gallon if you're lucky, and a tank that swallows 200 gallons at a time. When gas was cheap, you didn't think about it. When it wasn't, every trip out past the buoys started costing real money, and the math of a Sunday afternoon began to sting in a way it never used to. Then came the fuel itself. The gas they sold now had ethanol in it, and the tanks on these older boats were never built for it. On the boats with fiberglass tanks, the new fuel actually ate at the tank from the inside, pulling the material loose and carrying it straight into the engine. Men opened up the paper one morning and read that the only real fix was to cut open the deck of the boat and pull the tanks out entirely. On a boat you loved, that was a wound that never quite healed. Then the marina raised the rent. The slip that cost a few dollars a foot when you bought the boat crept up year after year, until one season you sat down with the bill and realized the dock was costing you more than the boat payment ever had. You were paying a fortune every month to keep a boat you used a handful of weekends a year, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice started asking, why? And the boat felt it too. It sat more than it ran now. The summers got shorter, or maybe you just got tired, and the long stretches where it sat covered and still grew longer every year. A boat that does not move is a boat that starts to go backward, and every spring there was more to fix before you could even leave the dock. A dead battery, a hose that had gone soft, something seized from sitting. The thing that used to be pure joy started to feel like a job, and a man only has so many springs left in him to spend fighting a boat awake. Then the letter came from the insurance company. The boat was past 20 years old now, then past 30, and the people who had insured it for decades decided it was not worth the risk anymore. The premium jumped. They wanted a survey. Some owners got dropped entirely, told that a boat that age was simply a loss waiting to happen, and were left scrambling for any company that would still cover it at all. And underneath all of it was the slowest, cruelest change of them all. There was nobody left who wanted to buy it. The grandkids who jumped off the swim platform grew up and did not want a boat. They wanted a phone and a plane ticket. The young families who might once have bought a used cruiser looked at the fuel and the dockage and the upkeep and quietly walked the other way towards something small they could pull behind the car. The generation that had wanted these boats was the generation that had bought them, and that generation was getting old. The companies that built them felt it too. The famous old names that stamped those hulls closed their doors one by one until the boat in your slip was an orphan, with no maker left to stand behind it. You had bought it believing a name like that would last forever, the way the good American names always seem to, and now you could not even call them for a part. So now you were an old man with a big old boat that ran fine and meant everything and was worth almost nothing. You put it up for sale and the phone did not ring. You dropped the price and dropped it again until you were asking less than you had once spent on a single season of dockage, and still nobody came. The thing that had once announced to the whole harbor that you had made it had quietly become the thing you could not get rid of. And here is where the story ends for too many of these boats, and it is the part that ought to break your heart. The men who own them get tired, or they get sick, or the money finally runs out, and one day they simply stop coming down to the dock. They stop paying the slip. They walk away. There is a hard truth the harbor masters all know, that the people who walk away are never the ones with the nice boats worth real money. It is the boats nobody wants that get left behind, chained to the dock, going green, waiting. The marinas cannot even sell them. Some get handed off for $1 just to clear the slip. Some get hauled away and taken apart at a cost of $100 per foot, paid by a state that is drowning in old boats nobody can afford to keep and nobody will buy. There are whole rows of them now in marinas up and down the coast, the boats on what the dock hands quietly call death row, lined up and waiting, every one of them somebody's old trophy, every one of them a story that ended the same way. Think about what that really is. It is not just a boat falling apart at the end of a dock. It is a man's proudest possession, the trophy for a whole life of working, the place his family was happiest, sitting there unwanted while the world walks past it without a second look. The dream did not sink. The boat still floats. It is the wanting that died. And the saddest part is that the man did nothing wrong. He bought the best thing he could afford. He took his family out on the water. He kept it clean and ran the engines and paid the bills for as long as he could. He did everything right, exactly the way they tell you to, and the only thing that happened is that time moved on and took the whole world that boat belonged to along with it. The fuel got expensive, the rules changed, the young people wanted something else, and a thing that once meant everything came to mean almost nothing at all. That's the cruelest kind of loss there is, not the loss of something that failed, the loss of something that did exactly what it promised, in a world that simply stopped having room for it. Nobody warns you about that one. They tell you to work hard and buy the good thing and take care of it. And he did all three, and it still ended at the back of a marina with the canvas going green. So the next time you walk a dock and you see one of them back there in the cheap slips, faded and quiet and forgotten, look at it for a second longer than you would have. Because once, on a bright Saturday morning in 1988, that was the finest thing a hardworking man had ever owned, and a whole family was about to climb aboard and have the best day of their summer. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so the next one finds you when it's ready.